Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, February 26th. We're back on the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined by Matthew Betz and Jason Moore.
How's it going?
I think it's going very well because we are in rookie scouting season, one of the best times of the year. It really is fun to just learn a new crop of humans and severely judge them and just, immediately declare whether they are good or bad based on several games of deep dive. You know what I mean? Like, just their career arc will be defined today.
I care mostly about where they came from and their story, and then that does shape if I like them as human beings. So you're right, Jason. Like, this is a chance for me to judge others.
Yeah, it's fun. I all joking aside, I do love this time of year when you get to learn the new players, the new crop, form your opinions, because it's just like in the draft season for fantasy football players where you've got your opinions on guys. You're going to draft the guys you like. You're going to avoid the ones you don't. And then as the season plays out, you're like, I was right, I was wrong. Here's why and where I was right and why and where I was wrong. And you just refine it every year. But it's the same thing in the scouting process of like, I believed in this player, it didn't pan out, or I saw this, I was ahead of the game there. Those are really, really fun. But I do think wide receivers specifically, and we're going through those today, are a little bit different to me because part of my process in watching a wide receiver is like to figure out, because wide receiver is not one position. You know what I mean? Like, wide receiver is like, there are different types of wide receivers in the NFL. And so you're kind of first just archetyping these guys into, okay, this is probably an outside X big body receiver, or this is, a downfield stretcher, or this is a jittery slot guy or whatever. So, there's not really that level of nuance, like a running back between, and a tight end that much, okay, it's a blocker or a pass catcher, but I ain't watching them blockers, you know what I mean? This is fantasy football. I want the downfield guys. So, but yeah, I find wide receivers are a little bit different in that. I judge them a little less.
Yes, McMillan and Burden, not the same type of guy. We're going to talk about that. It was funny you were talking about like judging these guys and having a bias towards their background. I remember on the show last year, we were all like, man, Roman Wilson, like this, he could go on day 2, and he has the work ethic, and he had this background we all went into. I don't know if he played like any snap.
I still believe he played a snap. I think he got into.
I saw a quote from the Combine from the Steelers GM saying they have a lot of faith in Roman Wilson this year stepping into a bigger role. So don't get out before it's
trade
before the good times are coming.
Trade for him right now.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Send multiple firsts. He's the guy you need this year.
Yeah.
I feel conflicted about wide receivers. And it's also because we come from different, like, I went to my foxhole and I figured out, like, what am I going to bring into this conversation today? So between the three of us, we didn't say this is exactly what we're going to do. And, I have some stats in front of us. We'll talk about the games that we watched on film. It's funny now because maybe this is Betz' doing, but like I kind of get typecasted as the stats guy and the spreadsheet nerd, when really my background...
Yeah, that's my fault.
That is you. When I first came to the Footballers, when I first started talking to Jason a decade ago, it was film work was actually how I got into this, was charting film for these players. I used to chart film for the Western Athletic Conference, which used to be a bunch of teams. It's no longer the WAC, but I did that for PFF for a little bit. Terrible conference to pick because their games would be like 55-45, like too many plays. And then I've kind of swung to like, I love the stat stuff. So I think for all of us here, it's tough because we come from different angles of what we're trying to say. I do think the stats matter, but I just want to make sure at the very beginning that people understand, like, we like all of it. We have a collective approach.
We've said this a million times, and I think this is becoming more and more the norm, but there are still the film guys who refuse to bring in analytics. And I think there's even more of the analytics people who don't even watch film. Lad McConkey last year was, I know a lot of people who were just OUT on Lad McConkey. Didn't even have a breakout age because, his dominator rating was below the 20% marker for a breakout, so therefore he didn't ever reach that because he was at like 19.8. And it's like, well, no, did you watch the game? Like, did you watch film? Because he's awesome. You've got to have both. And so here, I think we do as good a job as we can do at taking in everything, the story, the background. That's part of reality. It's hard to judge someone's work ethic. We don't get to go talk to the coaches. But in truth, that is a make or break for actual human beings succeeding at the next level in the NFL. But, sometimes the background matters, the story, where they came from. These are all human beings, so it really does matter. But I think for this show is primarily film with the analytics kind of sprinkled over the top.
It's interesting. I think that I'm more analytics with the film sprinkled throughout, which is
interesting.
Good.
Yeah, that's
a good
just
partnership.
I love these episodes because we haven't talked about these players yet. The three of us have not. I don't know if the two of you have, but I have not discussed these players, my takes, my opinions with you guys, nor have you with me. And we're in 3 different states right now. We've done all this work and we come together. We just mentioned right before we started recording one player that we were all high on, and we didn't, it was like, oh, darn. I wanted to be kind of different than everybody. But it also is really telling when there is consensus here, because I don't care what you guys think. And you guys don't care what we think. This isn't we're agreeing to agree or disagreeing to disagree. We kind of have our established thoughts, and so it's really neat when there is both variation and when it's like, oh, we unanimously love this guy.
Do you hear that, Best? Your boss doesn't care what you think at all.
It's fine.
I think that's
it's fine, Kyle.
I think that's true. Yeah, I'm happy that it's fine because I think that's true.
If you want
Love it.
All of our rankings, you can find them in the Ultimate Draft Kit. The Dynasty Pass is live right now, including some of Jason's rookie rankings, which you made some adjustments recently, and you'll make some more adjustments after the Combine. Are updating stuff all the time. And if you order before March 1st, you're entered in to win a spot in the Listener League, which I have no experience. Betz has no experience, but Jason, you've dominated that a couple times.
Yeah, I am, I believe, the only multi-time champion, which, to be fair, it is difficult for anyone else to win multiple times. They've got to do it in back-to-back years. So, if you get it now, you get a chance to get in the Listener League, and you're going to want this. And honestly, if you're listening to the Dynasty show, that means you're playing in a Dynasty League. Even though we're at pre-order pricing and the main Ultimate Draft Kit for the majority of just redraft leagues and all of that doesn't launch till June 1st. All the Dynasty stuff, it's up now. You're still getting pre-order pricing. It's out there. You alluded to, our Dynasty rankings, our rookie rankings. They're always updating. I have fresh new, based on, this round of preparation and film study, I have a fresh new ranking set that went up today. So even if you already have the Ultimate Draft Kit, in the UDK Plus, and you've looked at these, go check it out again. Look at the rankings, see how they're updating, because they are different. You can get that at the ultimatedraftkit.com, get the UDK Plus, or just be an Ultimate Foot Clan member, and then you get everything we ever do, always, forever.
We will have, just speaking to that real quick, we will have an update on Monday and Tuesday of this upcoming week after the NFL Combine, so we got all that data this week, and we'll have a fresh rookie mock draft in the UK Plus in the Dynasty Pass as well early next week.
Yep. UltimateDraftKit.com if you want to jump in. But this episode, we're going to talk all wide receivers.
Hey, rookie. Welcome to the NFL.
So like we said, we want to blend the film and the stats together. But before we do that, when you guys scout wide receivers, what do you look for? Because we have in our Dynasty Pass, like, here are the metrics for, what percentage of their team's receiving yards, and we kind of put that all together for a dominator score. But on film, Betz, what are you looking for when you look at these prospects?
Yeah, I will say, just from a simplistic view, for me, players, just looking at the analytical side first, players that didn't produce in college that we should expect to then be better in the NFL, I always have a tough time coming around on that. And there were guys last year that was yeah, the numbers weren't great, but man, just put on the tape, just watch him when he tries in these big games. It's if you didn't produce in college, I really have a tough time supporting that, especially if he's getting a lot of buzz as like a early first round pick or, whatever. But from an NFL standpoint, translating from college to NFL on film, I care a lot about what these guys are doing from a route running standpoint. There's guys that come out that are really good at one or two things. And I think back to this time last year, and it sounds silly because we know, obviously in hindsight now, it did not go great as a rookie. But there was a lot of people that were like, man, Malachi Corley, you get him the ball. He's so electric. Look what he can do. And a lot of what he did was this one-trick pony type stuff, manufactured touches, just wasn't really an NFL wide receiver in college. And obviously we know it didn't go great his rookie year and all that sort of thing. But I care a lot about a diverse route tree. Are you good at a lot of different things, or do you just have one calling card that you're good at and that's the only thing they ask you to do all the time? Those guys generally, in my opinion, historically have kind of struggled to adjust to the NFL, especially in year one. Not the guys can't have a slow start and turn it around, but just historically, that has been a sticking point for me on some of these prospects.
Yeah, when there's a system where you almost aren't running routes, you're just running. You're just kind of like over and over and over, like just run that way and go towards that, post or whatever, or stand there and take a screen. I see that a lot in the college game. It's really hard to trust that will translate early and efficiently to the NFL. And of course, when we're watching this, we're watching for fantasy football. So I'm looking for the explosiveness. I'm looking to find the Odell Beckhams and Jamar Chases and those types versus, I think there are really, really, really good wide receivers out there. I've got a guy in this class I think genuinely might be the best wide receiver, but I've got him comped to Jacoby Myers. So it's like, I think he'll succeed. I think he'll have an NFL career. He's not my number one or number two or number three fantasy football, rookie ranked wide receiver, because I think he's going to be just, a move the sticks here and there guy and not a massive 1,300 yard, 9 touchdown season in the cards ever. When I'm watching film, I talked about first and foremost, I'm trying to understand these players. I'm putting them into archetypes, but the traits I care about. You got to have good hands. I love to see fluid pass catchers, like how they're tracking the ball, how they catch it in stride. The confidence. I want good hands. I want separation. I can't stand these college guys that over and over they dominate these contested catches, and then they get to the NFL and it's like, well, you're not getting the ball. Maybe you could still dominate contested catches, but we're not going to throw it your way because you're not open. And then based on the fantasy football, qualifier, athleticism. Everybody getting drafted is a great athlete, but you need the super great athlete, the higher percentile athlete within the group. And I don't want to do that based on combine. This is one of those things where I think the analytics guys get it wrong a little bit more than the film guys. Is athleticism. Like, I want to see it on tape. I want to see a guy who pulls away from defenders, who breaks tackles, who does, it's like, okay, you can bench press this much, or you can run, he runs a 4.38, so he's fast. Well, is he fast on the field with pads on and, coming off of a cut, or is he fast at running, a 40-yard dash that you're never going to do in the NFL? So I think the athleticism, the separation, and the hands, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, when you talk about those traits, it's really hard to find somebody that has all of them. Like, I was thinking, like, man, who's somebody that created a lot of separation in the NFL this past year? Like, you saw them get targeted, but they had no hands. It's like Dontavian Wicks. It's like, this dude's open.
Right.
But his catch rate's going to be under 50%. Same thing with, like, A.D. Mitchell. He would flash and on the, have those moments at Texas, and you're like, I get why people like him. But when you think of like a diversity of skills, that's what I'm looking at for these players. It's like, it's great to have a trump card. If contested catches is your thing, that's cool. Like, I like that you can do that. But like Drake London was one of those dudes, he wasn't just that.
Right.
In college. He had all of those things. And so in terms of statistics, like, I just care, like, can you get open against zone? Because 70% of the time, that's what you're going to see in the NFL. And so if you can't get open in college against zone, or you don't know how to sit in spots, like, it doesn't look great on highlights when you see a wide receiver just sit in the zone and, they convert a first down. It's like, it's not the sexiest play, but it's like, those are the type of plays where the CeeDee Lambs or whoever just over and over and over again just have these chain movers. that translated from when he was at Oklahoma, he killed it there, and then he killed in the NFL.
And you see it. You see the opposite when you watch the film. You know, with wide receivers specifically, I'm only watching all 22 because I feel like you can't see anything if you're watching the broadcast version. And maybe I'll throw on like some highlights for fun. But when I'm watching all 22, and you see a lot of these college players, who's like, this zone coverage, and they just don't stop. It's like, oh, just stop. You're wide open. And he runs right to the defender. It's like, why did you not just stop in that zone? And then he stops like near the defender. It's like, you should have stopped like 2 yards earlier. You could have got that ball. So, that's not going to go well when you go to the NFL if you don't have that skill set.
We have some other statistics I won't get into. We have some great content on the website talking about different thresholds and where to look at in terms of like their yards per route run. I would say out of all the statistics we're going to talk about today, that's the one that's just the easiest to explain and the easiest from college to say, like Betz said, if you didn't do it there, maybe it's not the best thing. Like Jalen Reagor has the lowest yards per route run of any first-round wide receiver. And certain teams looked at that, like, I don't know, the Eagles, and said, hey, I want to take this guy over Justin Jefferson. And that's fine. And that's
still too soon.
Yeah, I just had to.
That's fine.
I had to lay it on the Eagles.
2 Super Bowls in the last 10 years. That's fine.
You guys, we hate you all. We hate you so much right now. We don't care about the Eagles anymore, man.
Jamar Chase could have been a Falcon, Kyle.
I live with that most days. All right,
they needed Kyle Pitts. They had to have him.
Dude, generational tight end at 4? Who else saw that coming? Not me. All right, we're going to go through some of these prospects, as many as we can today. And like Jason mentioned, all of these are in the Dynasty Pass. They'll be updated after the Combine. The first one we're going to talk about is Teteroa McMillan. We'll call him T-Mac because I'm going to mess up Teteroa every once in a while. But T-Mac from Arizona. The production is one of those things that you stand back and you go, okay, this makes sense why this player is getting first-round buzz. Most receiving yards in school history. He's listed at 6'5". I think he's probably going to come in shorter than that. But I found this quote from his coach very interesting, okay? He said, T-Mac is probably the biggest freak that I've ever been around. He doesn't have that great of a vertical. That was his next statement about him. But his coordination is freakish. He has great hand-eye coordination. He's the best athlete I've ever seen. So that doesn't really match up the way, like, oh, his vertical sucks. But in terms of production and where he's currently being slotted as like a top 15 pick, it makes sense based on how I play Dynasty that this player can work in the NFL because he has a diversity of skills. Like, don't just put him as an outside wide receiver. In the same way we look at Drake London as, you were big, you could do contested catches. I think that he could also line up in the slot, and he was good against zones. So my initial statistical take is I get why he's going there. My question to you guys is, did you guys like the film when you turn it on, Jason? Your alma mater.
It would, bear down. My man McMillan. I did like the film. He's my number one wide receiver. I think he's going to be everyone's number one wide receiver because I guess one thing we kind of buried the lead. This is not a great wide receiver draft class. It really isn't. Last year was good. Last year the running backs sucked. It completely flipped this year. This year running backs are very, very good. Several that were better than any last year. And if you look at the 10th, the 15th running back, probably better than the 5th or 6th running back last year. This year, the wide receivers, a lot of holes in all of them. So he is my number one. I see him. I've got him kind of listed to me as a poor man's Drake London. That was my comp when I watched him. I didn't see a whole lot from the route tree, but he does get separation. He does get open. He's got very good hands. And he's got the NFL body and athleticism that is unteachable. So if you've got a guy like this who's putting up massive production in college, that's great, checks that box, has an elite athletic body that is elite for the NFL, checks that box, gets open and catches the ball when thrown, like that's pretty much a home run. You add in that he will 100% be a first-round NFL draft pick, and I feel like this is near a can't-miss prospect. That doesn't mean to me that it is going to be a superstar fantasy asset like a Jamar Chase, but it doesn't feel like other first-round wide receivers, like a Corey Coleman, where it's like, oh, the sky's the limit, but it could really not work. This feels pretty safe. The team that invests in him is going to be so highly invested in him that he will become the one. Maybe not year one, but he will be they're one. He has to be when you're going to be the first wide receiver taken in the draft, assuming that Travis Hunter is not a wide receiver taken in the draft.
Yes. And real quick on that too, I don't know what it is, but like recently in the last 2 weeks, some of the bigger NFL mock drafters, he's kind of like slidden down like into like the late teens-ish range in those mock drafts, whereas like a month ago, everything was like, oh, top 10 pick. So not that that's a huge difference to us and what we care about, but just pointing that out, something to monitor. Yeah, I mean, analytically, he looks great. He's massive. He's got a breakout age of 19.4 years old. He put up a ton of yardage, a ton of catches and touchdowns these last couple of years. And, you know, I put on his film, the first play or first game I saw. I went back all the way to 2022 because I was like, I want to see how Jason likes to watch the most recent year. I like to watch a few games from each season to see like how they progress. The first game, 3 plays in, it is a ridiculous sideline one-handed grab, which is like Odell Beckham-esque type of catch. And I was like, okay, this is going to be very fun. And he has those types of ball skills where he will attack it in the air. He's really good on the boundary, really good in contested catch situations. But on top of that, he is also able to win over the middle of the field, like Kyle was saying. So I do see a pretty complete player. I agree with what Jason said. Like, there's no Jamar Chase level prospect in this class. It just doesn't exist. But if there is one that's going to stick around and be like the guy that we wanted in this class for Dynasty, I think everybody would agree the best bet here is T-Mac. So yeah, I'm high on him. I think he's a very good prospect, and certainly the wide receiver 1 in this class.
I think when you're talking about the draft, you know, him sliding just a little bit, people want what's sexy right now. And he just feels like the safest player that you could take there in your rookie drafts as the first wide receiver off the board. Like, I would be very happy. Let's say you missed out on Genty and you're trying to sort out, like, is it Marion Hampton next, Caleb Johnson, whoever else? I would feel totally fine. And if you're in a super flex draft, I would really debate. Like, the quarterbacks we talked about last week, like, I don't feel great. So I think McMillan's one of those players that you may not hit a grand slam, but like, if you hit a home run early in the game and then you hit a double later on, that's great. So baseball analogy, that everyone got that.
Everyone loves it. I will say too on him, when you think about his like explosiveness down the field, the one weakness I saw in his game, and I don't even know if it really matters that much, but just like thinking about Brian Thomas Jr. and kind of how he was coming out of LSU, like the dude was just insanely explosive down the field, just beating everybody deep all the time. I don't see like that high-end athleticism from T-Mac. Like, I don't think he's going to be a guy that wins down the field all the time. Not that he can't see, you know, targets 15 plus, 20 plus yards down the field, but I don't know that he has like the high-end juice that some of those guys last year had. So
I agree.
Just final point there on T-Mac.
Yeah. He had some yak plays that I was shocked. You know, in the first game against New Mexico, I was looking at that game. I was like, this is more than what I thought he would do, where you're not just throwing him 50-50 balls. So let's not like typecast him as just like a contested catch guy because he's tall. I think that's a lot of time what we do with some of these players. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll have the Travis Hunter debate. All right, we're back, and when it comes to Travis Hunter, there's a lot that we actually don't know, and that's okay. It's okay to admit that there's going to be a team that drafts him, and when his name is announced, there's going to be a position right afterwards that we're all going to pay attention to, you know, cornerback or wide receiver. At this point, we're going to talk about him as a wide receiver because I think it would be stupid to not mention the player that was the Heisman Trophy winner, Biletnikoff Award winner, and was awesome. If you watch the film, I think he's a really fun player. He's not a perfect player, but I think he's a really fun player. Also, he's from my home state. He's a legend here in Georgia, in Swanee, Georgia. So, Jason, I know we have to adjust based on, for Dynasty, like what position is he announced as? So, how are you handling him as a wide receiver prospect?
Yeah, so right now he's my wide receiver 5. If you're doing drafts right now, some people are doing drafts before the NFL draft. We don't recommend it, but you know, there's a lot of lovable lunatics out there, and that's fun. If you've got to call your shot, I'm gonna nerf him right now because I think he's going to be drafted primarily as a cornerback. I don't believe in the NFL. Now, he wants to play both ways in the NFL. That's great. And I'm sure there will be packages on offense. But if you just think pragmatically, if you are a full-time defensive player, you can come up with some packages on offense to utilize you because you get to dictate what happens on offense. On defense, you have to react. You don't get to dictate necessarily all the time what kind of defense you want to play. It's predicated on what the offense is doing. So if you're a full-time defensive player, you can work in on the offense. If you're a full-time, offensive player, you can't really just work in as a cornerback. Maybe if you're a pass rusher or something, you could come in on certain downs and work in on those packages, but it's much more difficult. So I do believe, and I don't think in today's NFL that a guy can really play 100% of the snaps both ways. I mean, when people play 90% of the snaps on offense, we worry that they're going to get injured. So essentially, for fantasy football purposes, I think this is going to be a player who does not get enough work, snaps, targets, opportunities to score fantasy points. If he were to be drafted as a wide receiver only, he very well might be my number one wide receiver. I think he's got a lot that I look for. He's got good routes. He's got nice little herky-jerky moves that get open and create separation. His hands are fine. He's obviously a phenomenal athlete. There's a reason why he, won the Heisman Trophy, and that he's great on both sides of the field. So I like him as a wide receiver, but for fantasy football purposes, I don't think he will get enough opportunity to be like a weekly starter in your lineup, and you just rely on him. He might get a bomb touchdown, might get a jet sweep for a touchdown around the goal line, or, maybe when he's on the field on a per-touch basis, he's really, really efficient because when he's on the field, it's a play designed to go to him. That being said, I that's not how I've ever played fantasy. I mean, very difficult to take, a Devin Hester, incredible Hall of Fame talent, but who just kind of is sprinkled in on offense and then say for fantasy football it's good. Like Sauce Gardner, how many fantasy points did he score you last year? If he's the best corner in the world, it doesn't help you. So that's kind of my thing with Travis Hunter. I don't know how much you really want to dig in on his wide receiver ability. I mean, do you guys think that there's a chance he's drafted primarily to be a wide receiver? Like there's a team out there that goes, we need a wide receiver more than a cornerback, and I think he's the best wide receiver. I'm going to take him, add him to our team. Like, is there a chance that flips?
I think it's pretty unlikely.
There's a chance.
There's just been such a steady drumbeat of NFL values him more as a corner. Obviously the combine is happening a few days after the show comes out, but like going to the combine primarily to work out as a corner, but also is going to do a couple of wide receiver drills. Like and all the mock drafts are he's a corner being taken, right? So it's like, I don't even know how much value there is in even talking about him as a wide receiver prospect because we'll adjust when the NFL tells us we should adjust. But dude is an absolute freak. I mean, to be able to play like 100+ snaps every single game on, collectively on both sides of the ball and still be doing it in the fourth quarter on offense when you're just gassed. This kid is different. So as a wide receiver prospect, if we knew he was playing wide receiver, I agree with Jason. Like he probably would be the wide receiver one in this class, but it's almost not even worth really having a nuanced, detailed debate or discussion about him just because.
All right, then let's have fun.
I think he'll play corner.
Then let's have fun. You are a general manager. What would you do? You've watched the tape. The requirements in the NFL. What would you do?
Hopefully.
What would I do?
I
would have this dude play 120 snaps a game.
So what's funny is that's how I am too. I'm actually the same way. I was talking about this off air to Andy. I realized more injury. Maybe you run out of gas or whatever. He did it in college. He was fine. He was great at both sides. And the NFL's harder. But it's like, if I'm a general manager and I can take a guy who is literally a top corner and a top wide receiver, you're getting a free first-round draft pick. I'm getting 2 first-round draft picks this year instead of 1. I'm getting an extra roster spot on my team because, when I'm cutting down to 53 or whatever, I've got a wide receiver and a corner. I'd use him till he breaks, man. I really would.
Hopefully I have a good coach if I'm the GM. Like I didn't hire some bum that doesn't know how to use this guy best. Like that's the thing about how he was used at Colorado was last year, all out wide. 94% of his snaps were out wide. The year before, mostly in the slot. So there is a diversity of skills and, you just turn on the tape. It's like this dude, for being, 185 pounds, what he's listed at, is just unreal body control. and just makes dudes miss. I think he would be best as like a flanker, like off the line of scrimmage as a motion man, in the same way that like Diggs, or I know this name isn't going to be sexy, but Robert Woods was that guy for the Rams for a bunch of years as the kind of motion man. But who knows? He's great. I want that too, though. I want this dude to be on the field the entire time, and I want to see greatness. I think we all want that.
Yeah. And that's just fun. It'd be so awesome if a guy's just add him to special teams, you know? Like, just don't ever let him get a break.
Just makes it 1 year in the league, just dead from just everybody.
What a year.
That would be so sad, but that year would be insane.
We call that a Robert Griffin.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. Too soon?
Come on.
So sad.
Soon.
It was a great year.
It's super sad. All right, next name we're going to talk about is Luther Burden III out of Missouri. There's a lot of different opinions about Luther Burden, including a report we were getting today of just across the board, he's dropping in a lot of mock drafts, whatever that means. The thing about Burden is he came in as the number 2 wide receiver recruit in the 2022 class, so highly recruited, and he's been a Missouri St. Louis guy his whole life. And I really like learning about that part of people's stories, like this is where I'm from, this is why I'm playing here. We talked about Devin Neal. It's like Kansas was his life. He went to Kansas and he showed out there. So Burden is one of those players that has the young breakout age. 18.7 is elite for a wide receiver. He's only 21 years old. And yet there's a lot of question marks of how is he going to be used in the NFL? Because a lot of stuff is short and he's best with the ball in his hands. Like when you see him, like he even took some punt returns that were like field changing. Like it actually changed the game when I went through and watched the Vanderbilt game. I was like, oh, he impacted the entire game, not just in screens. But Luther Burden, the yak plays that we've seen from certain players, sometimes that doesn't translate to the NFL when you don't get all these little dinky-doo short things. You need to figure out, like, there's linebackers who can actually run. There's safeties that will get up and pop you. So my comp for him is Curtis Samuel, a player who started as a running back in college, transitioned to wide receiver, and was kind of used in kind of a gimmicky way. I think Burden has more skills than just as a gadget player, but it does make me pause for fantasy, figuring out, like, is he going to be a high volume player? Betz, how did you feel about him?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same concerns and kind of ideas that you had there. Just you mentioned a lot of the short area type stuff. Over the last 2 years, 54 of his 147 catches were screens, which is 37%. That's a pretty high number of your touches there. So they would line him up in the backfield. He was in the slot almost, 85% of the time this past year, 82% the year prior. So when you think about, like, this is a slot wide receiver, in college, he was just a slot wide receiver for the most part. And that raises questions to me of how much playing time will this guy have? Now, presumably, if he would go in round 1, then the NFL team that he goes to has ideas of how to use him in 2 wide receiver sets and that sort of thing. But if you're slot only, it's pretty tough to be, like, relevant for us at a high level from a ceiling perspective in fantasy. You've got to get on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, and that's just a question mark I have. And looking at his route tree, like when he's in the slot fades, crossers, stuff like that, dude is explosive. When he gets the ball in his hands and he's in open space, very, very tough to bring down. So for me, very much a playmaker in the NFL, potentially. How much of, like, a true NFL wide receiver is he going to be? That's a question mark I have on Luther Burden. But I will say, if you like the analytical side of things, the breakout age is there. The true sophomore breakout where he put up a ton of production in the SEC, early declare, like all those things he checks the boxes for. But I just have question marks about his role and how it translates to the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's got some holes in the wide receiver game. He's very good. Borderline first round talent. When the ball is in his hands, he is better than most everyone on the field. He is so good, and they tried to get that happening more and more and more. You know, you talk about how many screens he had. Part of that is a negative, right? Like, but part of that is, okay, first of all, in my notes scouting him was how horrendous this quarterback was. And again, I didn't watch so 2 years ago, but it was some of the worst I've ever seen.
Cook.
So if I am a coach and I'm like, I've got
Don't tell people his name.
I've got this, extraordinary athlete who could at any point in time break a play for me, but my quarterback can't get him the ball if he's 10 yards plus down the field. Maybe I throw him a lot of screens. And so I don't want that to be completely a negative for Luther Burden III, who has an awesome supervillain name. But there are some holes. Like, I see him as a prospect. I didn't see a great downfield route tree. And the games, the handful of games that I scouted, I didn't notice that. But every time that he got the ball, he's got great hands. He'll catch it if it's thrown to him, catchable. I mean, he's been taught by bad quarterback play that, like, if you got a chance, you're going to need to catch that because they don't come around as often as you'd like, a catchable ball. So an extraordinary athlete. I kind of see, like a smaller Deebo Samuel or like a DJ Moore type of player where you're going to manufacture touches for this person. He is going to succeed at breaking tackles and creating some yards after catch, but raw. As a wide receiver, I don't think he's refined, ready to come in day one and just be, an alpha or be the wide receiver 2 on an every single play basis. So there are more concerns. I can see how it could go wrong, how it could never come to fruition to be a fantasy success, a consistent every week player. But I do love what he can do with the ball in his hands. Special talent, probably the best in this class with the ball in his hands at the wide receiver position. But yeah, some yellow flags to me. And I believe his targets per route run against zone, not very good. Not up to the level that we want to see it.
Now, is that his quarterback's fault?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly shared blame. You know what I mean? I didn't see personally. I did not witness downfield routes that I thought were very good. But also his quarterback sucks. I mean, it's littered throughout.
Kyle,
my
did you
notes.
want to say his name again real quick?
I forgot it already. What was his name?
Oh man, poor Brady Cook. No,
Poor Brady Cook.
What if
you know what? You got to play college ball. Congratulations, Brady Cook. You're going to look back with great memories. Be proud of yourself. Not everyone is an NFL quarterback, and you, sir, are not.
Mizzou fans, like, he's kind of a big deal. Like, he's been their quarterback for 3 years, and it's just interesting if they're in interviews, because you have the combine interviews this weekend, and I wonder if they're talking to him. It's like, hey, so we really like you. Gosh, we did not like your quarterback. So you're falling, man. It's not your fault. It's this guy's fault. It's we're sorry, we can't draft you because of your quarterback. So DJ Moore was the comp that a lot of people throw out, and I agree.
Oh, really? I haven't. That's funny.
No, that's what I love about you, Jason. Is like you go down in your foxhole, you look at it, all your stuff, and then you come out and you share with us. DJ Moore, you think about his usage, like taken the first round by the Panthers, and then Curtis Samuel, the player I also comped him to, was also taken by them. They flip-flopped roles of like, he's the yak guy, he's the deep guy. And it wasn't over time that you saw that DJ Moore can be all of that. So I think the best case scenario is he goes to a team that figures out how to use him like DJ Moore. I think we would all say that's probably too high of a comp. I think DJ Moore is just
DJ Moore is a better. He was a better prospect than Luther Burden.
Yeah. All right.
The third.
LB3?
His name is. I think he has my favorite name in the draft class. I know sometimes our favorite names are always just awful names or funny names, but Luther Burden III, like, you got the Lex Luthor thing built in. Then he's a Burden, but this is a generational name. This is the third Luther Burden. I mean, we
need this to work.
That name has the dog in it.
We're going to workshop. Eventually, it'll come to who he is, as a villain or not. All right, next name is Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Technically a grad student. I kind of throw that aside. When he was coming out of high school, he was the number 1 wide receiver recruit in the 2021 class, which, by the way, had some names on it. Number 3, Jason, Troy Franklin.
Ooh, hey, it's Franklin.
Hey, it's Franklin.
Yeah.
Number 9 that year was Brian Thomas Jr. 13 was Worthy. 19 was Malik Neighbors, and 21 was Marvin Harrison Jr. So it was a stacked class, and he was number 1 in that group. And the production that he had his sophomore year was awesome. Got hurt in 2023, had some knee and ankle injuries, and he's now Ohio State's all-time record holder for career receptions, which they've had a lot of good wide receivers. I don't know if you'd ever say that he was the best wide receiver on his own team any of those years because they have way too many awesome
I was
players.
gonna say that's kind of not fair when you're with the group of elite first round talent that he has been with. That just sounds
mean.
really like he's not good. Where it doesn't sound like, oh yeah, he was playing with Garrett Wilson or Marvin Harris Jr. or these other elite awesome players.
JSN, Chris Olave. Yeah, we're going to be talking about
is he the
Ohio
next
State.
one? Is he the next Ohio State great player?
So the thing about Agbua, I think he has the highest floor other than McMillan in this class of just, I think he's going to be good for a long time. And I think it's because what he does best works in today's NFL as a slot wide receiver, because that's how he's mostly used, 73% of a snap, who I wouldn't say he's super quick. I wouldn't say he's explosive, but I feel like he knows what he's doing out there in his feet. I wrote, he just doesn't waste steps. And so with his routes, you're getting a lot of these choice option routes or outbreakers and stuff that I just think can work at the next level. Like my comp for him is he's a shiftier, this is a high-end comp, Chris Godwin, which when Chris Godwin was coming out was exclusively slot. He's a bigger dude. Chris Godwin's a little bit taller than him, but can work in the slot and have seasons where he has high-end outcomes, especially in the red zone. Like for a dude that is not particularly tall like McMillan, I feel like he was a menace when they got in close in the red zone, like even some contested catch stuff. So I think he's tougher than just your typical slot wide receiver. Another comp that was out there was Christian Kirk, and the low end would be Sterling Shepard. All of these players had good, long NFL careers, and yet I don't think he profiles as a 1 at the next level, which isn't a bad thing. I just think that's where he's at.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He profiles like a Tyler Boyd. I've got him comped to Jacoby Myers. This is a solid NFL wide receiver. And if I was an NFL GM, he'd be the second wide receiver off the board for me. I know he's not going to fail. He does every single – he is an above-average athlete. He has above-average hands. He has above-average route running. He seems like he's got, from what you can tell from a distance, he's got above-average football IQ. The big moments weren't too big for him. I mean, I loved everything about him. But we're playing fantasy football, and you're right. He doesn't profile to be the one, the alpha. He doesn't profile to be, Tyler Boyd has had a great career and has been a relevant fantasy asset that you play from time to time. Same with Jacoby Myers. Like, he's been very good, and he's played, and this is a guy who helps fill your flex often. But that's not what you're going. Well, when you're in your rookie draft, I'm not looking to fill my double flex on a regular basis. I'm trying to shoot for the moon because I don't want to just, be the 5th best team in the league and be above average. I want to win the championship. And so that's the hardship here with Egbuka. He's really, really, really good. Doesn't profile to be a 1,400-yard, 9-touchdown type of player. So I've still got him even for fantasy. I don't want to. I've got him at my wide receiver 3 because I do think the red flags with a lot of other players are large enough where there is a place to take a single. You know what I mean? To say there's everything is a bet in fantasy football on odds. And so I know I'm not going to fail to have some value when I draft Egbuka. Like, he will provide fantasy value. There is a percentage chance, Luther Burden III, his ceiling is so much significantly higher than Egbuka. If you're telling me one of these guys is going to have a top 5 wide receiver fantasy season, it's going to be Luther Burden III. But what is the percentage chance that you get absolutely nothing from him, or that he just gets good enough to be what Egbuka is on a regular basis? And so, I personally, I've got Egbuka 1 spot ahead of Luther Burden at wide receiver 3. But this is telling to me, like, I think he's probably the best wide receiver, like you said, the highest floor wide receiver. If I was a general manager, I'd take him second after T-Mac. For fantasy football purposes, though, I view him as just a low-level flex option as his career. And that's what this wide receiver draft class is. Like a low-level flex option is kind of my third wide receiver this draft class. You would hope for more.
I'm just laughing because, like, imagine going into your rookie draft and being like, all right, baby, let's find the next Tyler Boyd.
Right, yeah.
It's so funny. But, yeah, real quick, just to push back on some of, like, the ceiling concerns that you guys might have about Ibuka. In 2022 with C.J. Stroud, you look at kind of his production next to Marvin Harrison Jr., which we were disappointed by the rookie year, but, like, coming out, Marv was the prospect of all prospects that we've seen in forever. He had the same production, basically, as Marvin Harrison Jr. in 2022. Then the quarterback play falls off. Last year, he gets hurt. And then this past season, he plays with Jeremiah Smith, who he'd be like the first pick in the NFL draft this year if he came out. I mean, this guy is incredible. And playing next to Trayvon Henderson and Quinshad Judkins and all these dudes. So, I think it's difficult to put context around some production sometimes because his teammates were so good. And he still produced, even battling through injury and stuff. So I think there is more ceiling than maybe you guys think with this guy. But I agree with you on the floor. I think his floor is incredible, and I think NFL coaches are going to absolutely love him because he also blocks his tail off in the run game.
Oh, he just
feels like a pro.
He is such a pro.
He's just a pro.
I mean, this guy is he is awesome front to back everywhere. It's just his utilization. I don't think he'll be a down the field guy. And if you're not a down the field guy, you're going to need 100 receptions, and I'm not sure he's that either. So, but yeah, I mean, every snap I watched, I loved this guy. I mean, this is where I'm sometimes sad to do fantasy as opposed to NFL, where it's like to get that player on your team. Who, if you're a football fan out there, you want to draft this guy. You want him on your team. He will make your team better for sure.
Yeah, the comps that I gave, like Chris Godwin had a wide receiver 2 overall season. Chris Godwin was awesome this year. He just never was the one for his team. Same thing with Christian Kirk. Like, he got free agency money, but we never thought of...
Christian Kirk was wide receiver 1 as well. I forget if he was wide receiver 11 or 12, but 11. He had...
Yeah, I think he could have a season like that because I think he's good in the red zone. I just worry if people go in thinking, like, this is another Ohio State wide receiver that's just going to ball out as a 1 in the NFL. He's just not going to be that guy. But, yeah, I like him. And I agree, Jason, like that tension of we cover this and we are looking at these players of how they're going to fit this game that we play. And then you sometimes zoom out, you're like, but sometimes I just like watching football. And this is a player like I liked watching his film from just a pure, this guy plays football.
I'm going to be a big fan of his.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and we are going to talk about Texas's A.D. Mitchell. Nope, not A.D. Mitchell. It's Matthew Golden. I need to say this because we're going to talk about the Texas wide receivers. No. Matthew Golden. We'll talk about Isaiah Bond. When you watch the film of Texas, like, part of it's hard because the guy throwing the ball doesn't have everything together. Quinn Ewers is going to go in the NFL draft. I just don't love him as a prospect. But the way that they utilize their players makes it really hard when you look at yards per out run and how often they're targeted. They kind of just push everybody aside and just kind of, like, even Xavier Worthy last year, his production profile was really good early on at Texas. He like broke out really early. And then over time, when Sarkisian came in and Ewers came in, it shifted how often these players were hyper targeted. So I bring that up just to say there's context for players like Matthew Golden, who started off at Houston, then came to Texas as a transfer this past year. And you just kind of have to figure out, like, okay, who is this player at the next level? Because Texas just has a different system. So his yards per route run, if you were to go in the first round, which he's getting some buzz since the college football playoffs, would be the second lowest of any first round wide receiver since 2016. So Jalen Reagor is like the worst of the worst. And then it's Matthew Golden. That's not everything. It's not the only statistic. It at least does say something, though, that in his big year, he didn't show out. There's a lot of empty routes and a lot of things where I just go, like, where was he? I don't think he's physical after the catch. I don't think he creates a ton of space in his breaks, but he can get off the line. And sometimes that just means getting open. And when he's in motion, he gets clean releases. Like, it can look really, really good, and he can look like an NFL wide receiver. I just have concerns about some of the production stuff. And also, if you look at his draft stock and what it was in, let's just say, December before that game, he was seen as a 6th-round pick. And then he has one big game, 2 big games really, and now he's a 1st-round pick. That's just a massive jump to me.
What's crazy?
He got hot at the right time.
Yeah, good for that young man. My notes on him are not rosy. If I'm just reading down through him, I'm like, wow, what a boring game. Almost nothing to write. He was meh. Got a touchdown, but didn't do much on it. He doesn't seem needed for the offense. He doesn't seem important to the offense. A lot of cardio doing nothing. Not necessarily great separation. Just not a lot to write home about going through the Michigan game, the Kentucky game, all these games. And then you get to ASU. You get to the ASU game in the playoffs, and he's the best wide receiver that has been or will ever be. I mean, in that game, he was the center core piece of the offense. He's toe-tapping on the sideline, making boss catches, breaking tackles, explosive athlete, separation galore, and you can't take that game away from him at all. Like, he did that, and so he showed he's got the talents, the skills, the traits to be able to do that. Now, one thing you need in the NFL is consistency. So then the question becomes, is this a player inconsistency, or is this a system underutilization? I'm going to go with the majority of the games I watch, so I'm a little bit lower on Matthew Golden. A lot of players have a breakout game or have just that magical moment where things are going right, you're feeling great. I don't know, you got great sleep or whatever it is. Maybe it's you rise to the occasion. That was the playoffs. You rise to the occasion. You're a win it matters most type of guy. But I want it to be more consistent. I want it to be every game. I want you to be out there earning these targets always. And so I think some of the production issues, the yards per route run, the late breakout age, the lack of prolific production throughout his college. Obviously, he was a transfer. I have a hard time just saying this one or two great game. These one or two great games should supersede the majority of the film. So I'm certainly not out on him. He showed he's got some skills and traits, but I would, if I had to make a bet as to whether I think he will be a star wide receiver in the NFL or not, I would certainly bet that he won't.
Yeah, he definitely has the shakiest overall profile of any of the wide receivers that are getting some round one buzz. And we've kind of mentioned already, like a lot of that production came late in the year. 311 of his 987 yards this past year came in 2 games, the SEC championship game and the college football playoff game that you referenced against Arizona State. Otherwise, he just disappeared.
It's ironic, because those are the hardest games. Those are the most – that's like where you would want it to come. So it's funny because if you made that same statement, it's like, 300 and, whatever it was, 90 yards of his 900 yards came against, Northern Iowa and Lake Michigan. It's like you'd be like, oh, okay. But then, no, the majority of his yards came in the toughest matchups and under the brightest lights. Step up. So he's really hard for me. Kyle, what do you think about Golden?
The profile says that this is a player that should be drafted more in the 3rd round or the 4th round. So that's like where I think it's more of like splitting the difference. Is he a 5th, 6th round pick? Probably not. Is he a 1st round pick? I don't think that the production's there. Like the comp that I have is Darius Slayton, which Darius Slayton has had some fun moments in the NFL. He's never been a 1. He's had to, his own teams really hated him, let's be honest. But a field stretcher who can have moments and big games and monster games really for fantasy, but never somebody who you could count on as a weekly starter. So the offense, though, is really hard. We're going to bring up Isaiah Bond next. Another player from Texas who is a little lower in our rankings, super fast. And when you watch the film, you go okay, there are games where he just does not show up at all. If you were to just turn on his highlights, you'd be like, this is the best player in college football. But if you watch the film and really okay, so why do they just not even scheme plays for him sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, Isaiah Bond, if we want to just chat about him since he's the teammate now and kind of go out of order, He is so fascinating to me, and it's funny to hear you say that, Kyle, because I was talking to Mike before the show, and I was like, if you watched Isaiah Bond, what do you think? Because it's like when I put the film on and I watch him, I like everything I see. I'm like, this looks like a shifty. I like his route running. He's so explosive. But then I'm like, but he didn't do anything. Like, he's like, he had 500 yards or 600 yards. Like, he never got to 700 yards in a season through his, collegiate career. And he's an undersized wide receiver. So it's like, my final line is, seems fine, fast and twitchy, but unproductive for an undersized player has me uninspired. It's really difficult. That's where the film and analytics go together. Like if all you had was just film of this player with the ball in his hands or on the targets he received, you'd say he is maybe a first round product, but he played 3 years and did jack squat. I mean, for the most part, did very, very little. And so to then turn around and say, well, yeah, he's going to get better in the NFL. The NFL is going to be like, this guy is so necessary to our team when he wasn't to Texas. That doesn't often happen. Like what examples in the history? Like I think Terry McLaurin might be like one of the only guys I could think of that really did jack squat in college and then is a relevant, really important NFL player. There are the examples where they don't do it. You don't remember the names because they didn't do it, but it's a bunch all the time every year. And I think that's what Isaiah Bond's probably going to – I mean, that's just an easy bet to make without the film.
Yeah, he, just for reference, averaged 1.79 yards per route run in his career,
Woof.
Which in college is so bad. So, yeah, I mean, played at Alabama, played at Texas, big-time schools, early declare, but, didn't ever produce. And so these are the guys that I really have a tough time getting behind, him and Matthew Golden, really, and I'm not trying to make the comp because of Texas, but Kyle jokingly said, A.D. Mitchell. And it's funny because the conversation around A.D. Mitchell, is played at big schools, showed up when it mattered most, has some moments on tape, but he never really produced. And so, everybody just washes that to the side. And it's like, man, I just care so much more about production at wide receiver than I do tape. And these guys both collectively I'm lower on because of that. I will say the combine is happening here in a couple of days. This guy is going to run very fast. Buyer beware. Do not buy the hype. There's not a lot of correlation with 40 time and NFL production, not just for the real life NFL, but for fantasy. So he's a guy that I think could get some steam after this weekend because he's going to Blaze. I'm going to probably fade that personally. So yeah, I'm lower on both Texas guys for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bring up is we'll have some stuff I'm finishing an article right now of what translates from the combine to production in the NFL for here's where they're drafted and then here's how it works for fantasy. And 40 is vastly overrated. I will say watching the game film, against lesser opponents. So is Texas, San Antonio, UTSA. He's just outrunning dudes. It's awesome. It's fun to watch. And I think that he can be dangerous over the middle. So I think overall we're going to be a little bit more pessimistic here. How could it work at the NFL? If he goes to an offense that's a West Coast kind of timing-based offense where they run 3 and 4 wide and he doesn't have to be the 1 or 2. So for instance, if he goes to the Vikings or the one that I came up with is the Bengals, if they didn't draft Jermaine Burton, but this dude gets to be their wide receiver 3. Sweet. This is a really fun player in a offense that's going to throw a ton, design plays for him. That's just for him, but he's not going to be a 1. He's not going to command the type of targets. So all of the comps are not very kind. If you're using production and you're looking at guys that are this height that never broke out with this low yards per out run, it's Mecole Hardman, Phillip Dorsett, and then technically Jalen Waddle never broke out, but also he got hurt. So my comp for him is he's a wannabe Jalen Waddle. That's mean, maybe, because that's too nice to even compare him to Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, I was going to say that's mean to Jalen Waddle. Yes. I don't think that's mean to Isaiah Bond.
He loves it. He loves hearing
about
it.
He's like, I am a wannabe Jalen Waddle. That's awesome. I want to be Jalen Waddle.
All right, this two more names here, and then we'll wrap up. Trey Harris from Ole Miss, or his full name is Cleveland Joseph Trey Harris III. So Cleveland.
Oh, I did not know that.
Adjust the ranks.
Give it to me again.
Cleveland
That's awesome.
Joseph Trey Harris the third. So Trey.
So
is,
he's a Trey because he's a third.
Yeah.
So he's Cleveland Joseph Harris.
Yeah.
And so, but he's the third Cleveland Joseph Harris. So he's Trey. I got it.
You think Luther didn't want that though?
No.
Luther Burden said no.
Well, one of you is named Cleveland. The other is named Luther. Luther Burden, you're keeping that name. Cleveland Joseph? You're like, can I go by anything else?
Trey Harris has a fun story. He was Malik Neighbors' high school quarterback in Louisiana. And he didn't want to do it. And part of the story is Neighbors said, like, no, I need you to throw me the ball because I'm going to be great one day. And I trust you. So he had the trust from Malik Neighbors in high school, goes to Louisiana Tech, eventually transfers to Ole Miss. His first game at Ole Miss, it's against Mercer, which isn't a big school, but he set the Ole Miss single game receiving touchdowns record with 4 in his first game. And this past year, he missed the final month. But if you want to look at just production profile stuff, Jason, I haven't shared these numbers with you. They break every single spreadsheet possible. They don't work. So I'll let you gush now.
Yeah,
this is over the top.
This is my dude, man. I really, really liked the film. And so one of the things I do, because I don't want to have like analytics bias, is I try to watch film before I go and look up their production profiles, look up the because the analytics are objective, right? They're going to say what they're going to say. It's not going to change. When I watch a film, I might go and be surprised by the analytics, but it is what it is. If I do the analytics first, I kind of go in watching film expecting to see what I already kind of know the results are going to be. And so when I watch Trey Harris, I'm going down through the kind of consensus board, the wide NFL draft, not just fantasy, but like, where are they supposed to be drafted? What kind of a prospect is this? And he's, I don't know, like the 6th, 7th, 8th wide receiver. And I was constantly like, that looks like an NFL wide receiver to me. That looks like he's a big guy. I don't know, what is he listed at? 6 foot, 200?
6'3".
6'3", 210 pounds. And, I don't know if he'll measure that, but he looks at on the field. He looked like one of those guys that was stronger than most of the defenders, definitely faster. And because he was tall and heavy, his speed is a little deceptive. I think I'm really excited to see what he runs, but on film, when he got a little bit ahead of his steam, if he was on a cross or something, you're probably not stopping him. You're not going to get him down. And while, he's like 17, 18 yards per reception, a lot of times those type of players, when you go watch their college film, it's just the Jalen Hyatts. I got 50 bombs over the top. I ran in a straight line and I beat you. This wasn't what I saw on film. On film, he's getting tons of screens. He's getting crossers, in the field. He was a central part of the offense. I just thought he looked like he was smart. He looked like he was capable. He created separation. He had good hands. There wasn't a lot that I didn't like about him. And I was just surprised considering he was already behind some other wide receivers that I was not enjoying watching in the scouting process. He's a little older. I mean, he played 5 years in college. I don't love that. He's only 22 right now. So this isn't like a 24-year-old prospect coming in, but usually you want the early declare players.
Turns 23 on Friday.
Yeah, this is not a
Happy birthday, Cleveland.
happy birthday, Cleveland. So that's a knock. For sure. But when I looked at the film, I was just pleasantly surprised. And then I go and I look at the production. I'm like, okay, 3 years ago, he had 900 yards. 2 years ago, 985. This last year, 1,000. And then after that, I realized what you had just said, Kyle, which was he missed the final month of the season. That was in only 8 games. So he's getting better every season. The production is there. The film was there for me. The body, the size, the athleticism was there. I'm not pounding the table like this is going to be the greatest player of all time, but I am very much ahead of, the consensus. Like he's my wide receiver too, so far. Now, obviously, if consensus right now happens throughout the end of April and the beginning of May during the draft, and he's a 4th round pick, then okay, I'll fully adjust completely. But right now, just on the film and the things I look for and I like that matched the analytics. Oh, that was the other thing. Then I was like, okay, yards per route run. I looked at that after. Oh my gosh. So yards per route run, you definitely want to be over 2.5 for college, 2 in the NFL. You want to be over 2.5. If you can get high 2s, that's really, really nice. Against zone coverage, he's sitting at 4. And it's like, heck yeah. That's like what you're seeing from top first-round prospects. And then you look across the line and you're like, against man?
Oh, baby.
10? I was like, when I saw that, I knew it was a typo. Like, I was like, oh, that's like someone wrote that wrong. I've never seen a double-digit yards per route run number ever. And those are those are pretty telling numbers. So the fact that I liked the film surprisingly, and then I go look at the analytics, and it was, it's obviously very, very good. I'm confirmed in my film bias, so I really like the guy. But this was a player I was excited to tell you why I liked, assuming that you guys were lower, because I just see where he is on consensus. But when we came in before the show, we were sad to find out, or maybe thrilled to find out. I don't know. You guys are both in on Trey Harris, right?
He's our dude. Apparently, Kyle,
he is our...
You said at the top of the show that I typecast you into the spreadsheet guy. For those that are not watching on YouTube, I would encourage you to watch Kyle's face. He smiles. He's so happy when he hears all about these nerdy yards per route run.
10.47 yards per route run. It does not make sense.
He averaged 20.7 yards per target this past year against man coverage, which is just stupid. Granted, it was only 38 routes. But I'm with you, Jason, and I agree with you. Like, if there's one guy that I think we're all higher on collectively than the consensus, it is Trey Harris. I like him more than Burden. I like him more than Texas guys. Like, I like him more than Ibuka. He's just good. And he's explosive, especially like late in his route. Like when he kind of catches the ball and he's kind of in the final part of the route, he just blows away from dudes. I think he's quick off the line. I think he can win on routes in the middle of the field. I think he can win on hitches and comebacks and screens and all those things. So I do say all that with a small grain of salt. And if you listen to the Jackson Dart conversation from last week that Kyle and I did,
that's the point.
I would encourage you to listen to that, because a lot of Dart's numbers that we talked about with Ole Miss were maybe inflated by the Lane Kiffin effect of the scheme, but that's what he was asked to do, and he was incredible at it. So I am interested to see what the NFL says about this guy, because I agree with Jason where it's like you watch him, you look at the numbers, it's like, how is this guy not getting more buzz? But that happens to us all the time in fantasy, and the NFL says, maybe not so much. So yeah, I'm really interested to see where Harris goes when we get to the NFL draft.
Yeah, I don't want to overinflate it. My notes have, not a super crisp route tree, but I can see how it can translate. He's not a perfect prospect by any means, but he has the qualities to be able to win at the next level. Yes.
And his body says that he should be an outside wide receiver, but he doesn't move like that. This is Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas was big enough, but he didn't play like that. He played like a Z wide receiver where you're getting a lot of slants and stuff underneath. I just think he creates leverage where a lot of wide receivers, they don't understand how to create space, and I feel like he just does such a good job. So my comp is not like Jacoby Myers. This is where I had him.
Oh, how funny.
But my favorite comp is going to throw people back. This is Cameron Meredith, another former quarterback who transitioned to the NFL and then had a couple of years way back in the day with the Bears and then with the Saints.
I do not remember Cameron Meredith.
Oh, Jason, how could you forget? I wrote a whole film article about him in 2017.
I mean,
he was the hotness in Dynasty for like a month.
He was super fun. All right, I want to make sure I mention this name, and then we're going to close out. But I'm going to make sure I get this name right. I'm tasked with this. Alec Iomenor.
You
pretty good.
You did very poorly. I mean,
dang it, you do it then.
The sounds of the syllables, the sounds of the syllables were right, but that's like saying I'm going to say hip Optimus. Like, I got him right, but you didn't get it right because you didn't say it. Yeah. So first name Alec, last name is Iomenor. We watched it. We watched an interview beforehand, so it's like Aya, and then it's Manor. So Iomenor. So it's hard. It's a unique name. What'd you guys think of him as a prospect?
So his best moments are really fun. And the one that stands out, if you go to 2023, is against Travis Hunter. And he has a monster game. And I'm talking like they were left for dead, Stanford. They come all the way back. and they beat Colorado. It's just a wild, wild game. 13 for 294. And his overtime catch against Hunter is just like, you are a beast on the field. So he has the size to translate to the next level. I don't know what he's going to run. I think he's going to be in the 4-4, 4-5 maybe. I just wonder if he finds the right offense, like he can be a number 2 at the next level. Because for a bigger dude, I think he can actually run pretty crisp routes, which I would say doesn't really happen for a lot of guys. So I like him. I just don't know his fit yet.
Yeah, I echo some of that. I've got notes that he's fast and he's big. So that's always a nice thing for the NFL, especially after the last couple of years of all these itty-bitty baby wide receivers coming out. Now we've got some bigger-bodied kind of alphas. The problem is he doesn't project to be an alpha number 1 wide receiver to me. So and he really wasn't on his own team this centerpiece of the offense. It didn't seem like it's his team. For someone that is big and strong and fast, but he's a good athlete. He's got some twitch to him for a bigger guy.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I'll just push back real quick on the Travis Hunter thing. I feel bad because it's exciting, but if you watch the game, a lot of those targets were not actually lined up on Travis Hunter. It was a couple of catches,
the overtime
and the one
catch
the one that people talk about is the overtime catch. So if you hear he put it on Travis Hunter in college, he must be a good wide receiver. He put it on Colorado in college and had a couple of plays against Travis Hunter. But I will say, redshirts his first year and then has over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. So it's okay, you produced early in your career. That's a good thing. But he's tough to really evaluate, right? Because it's so much of that production came in that game. He didn't really have a lot of high-end wow plays that I saw on tape for the most part. So yeah, I think he's fine. I think he understands zone coverage pretty well from kind of finding the soft spot. I thought he had a nice burst after the catch for a bigger guy. So there's some things to like, but I don't think he's by any means a great prospect, I would say. He is getting some day 2 buzz though in the NFL draft, which is good to note. So we'll see where he goes. And I do think he's going to test pretty well at the combine, so he could be another potential riser from that.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, the names that we talked about today, I feel pretty good about most of them. Harris is a wild card. He could go on day 3 just because there's teams that know something or don't like certain parts of his game or think he's older. But I think most of these guys are going to go day 2 now, or day 1 and day 2. I don't think they should, but that's kind of the market and where things are. And so for the game that we play in Dynasty, I feel like you're going to get a lot of value if you have picks in the early second round. Late first, early second round, I think there will be a couple of dudes here that you will feel good about. There's good draft capital. Where last year, you're throwing darts at A.D. Mitchell and stuff that got the draft capital, but we all said I feel like this isn't going to work. I mean, Jason, I think you were bullish or that he was not going to work, but Andy was bullish that he was.
Yeah, Andy really liked
it that way.
Yeah, that's a weird way to say it. No, I was very
bullish.
anti Adonai Mitchell. However, I was very pro Troy Franklin. So you can't get them all right. Maybe there's still time. I can be wrong on both or right on both. We'll see.
I'm still holding out a little bit for Franklin. He's not done.
No, he's not done. He's going to get a lot of opportunity this next year, but it's got to be now or never.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode. We're going to keep talking rookies leading up to Combine next week, leading up to the NFL Draft. Make sure you check out Ultimate Draft Kit, the Dynasty Pass. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.